Good evening. It's called the Windsor Framework, and Prime Minister Sunak has just delivered his speech to the House of Commons. Interestingly, after praising his predecessors, he spent most of his speech telling us how absolutely awful the Northern Ireland Protocol had been in terms of the economic life of those living in Northern Ireland and businesses here on the mainland trying to trade with them. So what's he come up with? Well, he tells us that the border in the Irish Sea has now gone. There'll be a green lane for goods that move back and forth between the mainland and Northern Ireland. Though we did concede, there still would be checks on up to 5% of those goods. But that, I guess, in a way, is progress from a situation that was truly, truly awful. Also, the European Union will allow us to set our own rates of excise duty and VAT, but of course they can concede that happily, knowing that this is a government that doesn't cut taxes, it's one that puts them up, and they're expecting Labour, of course, to be in office in 18 months' time. But the absolute nub of this agreement, and whether it passes the fit and proper test, is around the issue of sovereignty. Clearly, if a court in Strasbourg, if the European Union's own court in Strasbourg still has the final say, then Northern Ireland simply hasn't got Brexit in any recognisable way. Have a look at these exchanges and a question that was asked by the Irish broadcaster RTE about the continuing role of the European Court of Justice, and you'll see the response from Sunak, and then you'll see the response from Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and make your minds up who you think is telling the truth.
Know that many people in Northern Ireland are worried about being subject to changes in EU goods laws. To address that, today's agreement introduces a new Stormont break. Many had called for Stormont to have a say over these laws. But the Stormont break goes further and means that Stormont can, in fact, stop them from applying in Northern Ireland. This will establish a clear process through which the democratically elected Assembly can pull an emergency brake for changes to EU goods rules that would have significant and lasting effects on everyday lives. If the brake is pulled, the UK government will have a veto.
The Unionists say they want to be treated the same, and it's to both leaders. They want to be treated the same as any other part of the UK. However, Northern Ireland is the only part of the UK that shares a land border with the EU. So there will have to be some differences for Northern Ireland compared to the rest of the UK. Do you believe the Unionists will accept different treatment? And can you point to how, for instance, the European Court of Justice will have jurisdiction in Northern Ireland?
I think we all collectively share an ambition to avoid, as you say, a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic, and that's why there's a role for EU law in Northern Ireland, but that happens with consent, and as a result of the agreements that we've reached today, there is further democratic accountability of that role of EU law with the new Stormont break, which provides a very powerful mechanism for the Stormont institution to use when it has concerns, and I think that is really important part of correcting the democratic deficit that existed and providing reassurance to everyone in Northern Ireland that they are in control of their own destiny.
Yes, indeed, the European Court of Justice is the sole and ultimate arbiter of EU law. That's natural because it's prescribed by the EU legal order. So the ECJ will have the final say on EU law and single market issues.
So it couldn't be clearer, could it? Despite being asked a very specific question about the role of the European Court of Justice and the fact that in this Windsor Framework document, the government very boldly says the sovereign power to veto new EU rules will be with us, Ursula von der Leyen makes perfectly clear that the European Court of Justice will be the final arbiter. The EU court will have the final say. And for me, that's why this so-called deal doesn't cut the mustard. We await the legal texts, which will come out over the course of the next few days. Interestingly, Keir Starmer's Labour Party will vote for it. I don't think, as I predicted last week, we'll see any cabinet resignations. Oh yes, there'll be some of the ERG will kick up a fuss when they realise what they've been told by the Prime Minister isn't the truth. Although it's not him we should blame. It's Theresa May and Ollie Robbins, or now Lord Robbins, of course, for his wonderful skills at negotiating. Barnier, Verhofstadt and the others deliberately used Northern Ireland to trap the British negotiators. They did it brilliantly and we're living with the consequences. So you tell me, is the Windsor Framework a win? Give me your views. Farage@gbnews.uk.